Life on the frontier was not easy, but this video showcases 10 incredible women who lived during those times and made history. So let's get started, and welcome to the Wild West. Number 10. The Lady with the Blue Tattoos. Olive Oatman was one of 7 children born in 1837 in Illinois to Royce and Mary Oatman. In 1850, the Oatman family decided to join a wagon train bound for a Mormon settlement in Southern California. When they reached New Mexico, the family parted from the group and continued on solo. On February 18, 1851, her family was killed in present-day Arizona by Native Americans, most likely the Yavapai tribe. They captured and enslaved 14-year-old Olive and 7-year-old Mary. Their brother, Lorenzo, was badly hurt and woke up to find his family killed and sisters missing. Olive and Mary were held at the Yavapai village, forced to do various tasks, and were often beaten. A year later, a group of Mojave Indians visited the village and traded goods with them, including taking both girls back to their own prosperous village in Southern California. Here they were treated far better than before, and the tribal leader and his wife adopted the girls and gave them plots of land to farm. Whether the girls were truly accepted into the tribe is unknown. The Mojave did mark both girls, though, with intricate blue cactus tattoos, keeping with the Mojave custom, something only their own people were given to ensure a good afterlife. Sadly, in 1855, 11-year-old Mary died of starvation, along with several other Mojave people due to a severe drought. When Olive was 19 years old, rumors began to circulate that there was a white girl living among the Mojave. At first, the Mojave denied she was white and didn't want to release Olive, claiming their affection for her. Eventually, she was ransomed and escorted on the long journey to Fort Yuma. Olive was eventually reunited with her brother Lorenzo, and the story made headlines. Olive went on to lecture about her experiences, and with the fondness of the Mojave, that eventually dimmed. She may have suffered from Stockholm Syndrome. Olive married cattleman John Fairchild in November of 1865, and the couple adopted a baby girl. Olive passed away on March 20th, 1903, at 65 years of age. Number 9. Stagecoach Married. Mary Fields, the first African-American woman to become a U.S. Postal Service Star contract route mail carrier. Mary was born into slavery in Tennessee in 1832 and freed when slavery was outlawed in the United States in 1865. Little is known of her early life, but Mary stood 6 foot tall and was a tall, strong woman who wouldn't tolerate disrespect. In the late 1870s, she became a housekeeper at the Ursuline Convent in Ohio. When her close friend, Mother Amadeus, transferred to St. Peter's Mission, just outside of Cascade, Montana, initially Mary stayed behind until she heard Mother Amadeus had come down with pneumonia. Mary rushed to her side and nursed her back to health. Mary stayed on at St. Peter's Mission for 10 years, doing maintenance work around the buildings, along with gardening, laundry, and hauling supplies in from town. Though devoted to her work and the nuns, she drank in saloons and had a quick temper. In 1894, she was dismissed from the convent after several complaints and a brawl with another worker. In 1895, now about 60 years old, Mary acquired the Postal Service contract for mail between Cascade and St. Peter's Mission. She worked for the Postal Service for 8 years, never missing a day on the job. Her reliability and dedication earned her the nickname Stagecoach. Even if the snow was too deep to drive the coach through, she'd hand-deliver the mail wearing snowshoes, carrying the mail herself. Mary became a well-loved and respected public figure in Cascade. The town closed its school so they could celebrate her birthday each year. When a law passed forbidding women from entering saloons, the town mayor granted her an exception. In 1903, now 71 years old, Mary retired from her job, but continued to babysit many of the town's children and owned and operated a laundry service from her home. Most of the money she earned she spent on candy for the local children. Mary passed away in 1914 around the age of 81. Number 8. Rose of the Wild Bunch. Laura Bullion was born around 1876 to a German mother and Native American father. Born in the rough town of Knickerbocker, Texas, her own father, Henry Bullion, was a bank robber. It was no surprise when she decided to turn to a life of crime as well. At 15, she began a romance with her dead aunt's husband, William Carver. William and fellow outlaw Black Jack Ketchum worked together robbing trains before William moved on to Utah, joining Butch Cassidy's Wild Bunch. Laura had followed suit. She eventually turned her attention to Ben Kilpatrick, another member of the bunch. when William left her for a prostitute named Lily Davis. Laura helped by selling stolen goods and making connections that could provide them a steady flow of horses and supplies. Laura and the Wild Bunch committed several train robberies. While she and her lover Ben returned to Texas, her ex, William Carver, was ambushed and killed by lawmen in 1901. She and Ben fled to St. Louis, Missouri, and were arrested on November 8, 1901. Ben was found guilty of robbery and sentenced to 15 years in prison, while Laura got off much easier with a 5-year sentence. Laura was released from prison on September 19, 1905, after serving only 3.5 years there. She moved to Tennessee and lived out her life quietly, under the name Frida Lincoln, earning her keep as a seamstress and dressmaker. In 1918, posing as a war widow, she became an interior decorator. A relatively ordinary lifestyle after such a rebellious beginning. She never saw her lover again, Ben Kilpatrick. He had been released from prison in 1911 and went back to his old ways. In 1912, he was killed while trying to rob a train. Laura passed away on December 2, 1961. Her tombstone reads, Frida Bullion Lincoln, Laura Bullion, the Thorny Rose. Number 7. Big Nose Kate, Doc Holliday's lady. Mary Catherine Horony, or Kate for short, was born November 9, 1849 in Hungary. The family relocated to Iowa, but in 1865, Kate's parents died within 1 month of each other, leaving her and her siblings orphans. At 16, Kate ran away from her foster home and ended up working as a prostitute. Stowing away on a steamship headed for St. Louis, Missouri, Kate said it's there that she met and married a man named Silas Melvin and had a child. Sadly, both died from yellow fever. By 1874, she was living in Dodge City, Kansas, when she was fined for working as a sporting woman in a sporting house run by Bessie Earp, James Earp's wife. Years later, she met Doc Holliday down in Texas at a saloon. By now, Kate acquired the nickname Big Nose Kate to avoid confusion with another prostitute named Kate. Kate did have a prominent nose, but was very pretty, but also stubborn, liked to drink, and had a quick temper. She said she enjoyed her work too, belonging to no man nor to any house. A pivotal moment was in 1877 while in Texas. Doc was dealing cards to a local bully named Ed Bailey. Ed kept cheating at poker and Doc warned him. Ed drew his pistol to fire, but not fast enough to avoid Doc Holliday's swift knife across his chest. Doc had acted in self-defense, but when a dangerous vigilante mob formed, Kate thought fast. She set an old shed on fire, distracting the townsfolk, while she confronted the officer guarding Doc with a pistol in each hand, disarmed him, and the couple fled on stolen horses headed towards the infamous Tombstone, Arizona, saving his life. While they had a complicated relationship, the last straw was when in a drunken state she accused Doc of being a part of a deadly stagecoach robbery. She later retracted her story and all charges were dropped, but Doc gave her some money and put her on the stagecoach out of town. In 1888, Kate married a blacksmith named George M. Cummings and lived in Arizona just a few miles from Tombstone. She resided in the Arizona Pioneers Home until her death on November 2, 1940, just 5 days short of her 90th birthday. Number 6. Entrepreneur and Philanthropist. Bridget Mason, or Biddy for short, was born in Mississippi on August 15, 1818. Biddy was born into slavery, but gifted with skills in herbal medicine and midwifery. She was incredibly intelligent and had a large knowledge of medicine, childcare, and agriculture. Biddy was owned by multiple slaveholders until her last owner, Robert Smith, a Mississippi Mormon convert, moved his family and enslaved persons to the West in 1848. Biddy was 30 years old and responsible for setting up and breaking camp along with caring for her own 3 young children. In 1851, Robert Smith decided to head for California, knowing full well but ignoring the fact that it was a free state, meaning it was illegal to own slaves there. Along the way, Biddy met Charles and Elizabeth Rowan, a free black couple. They and others urged Biddy to legally fight for her freedom when they arrived in California. Robert chose not to free her when they did arrive, but Biddy wanted her freedom, so Robert decided to move to Texas instead, which was still a slave state at the time. Luckily, the LA County Sheriff was informed that slaves were being illegally held, so a posse was formed and apprehended Robert's wagon train before they got away. After 5 years of enslavement in California, Biddy demanded her freedom, and on January 21, 1856, her court petition was granted. The ruling freed her and 13 members of her family. She chose the surname Mason, after the mayor of San Bernardino. Afterward, Biddy moved with their children to LA, where she continued to work as a midwife and a nurse, even risking her life to help out during a smallpox epidemic. Biddy was a savvy businesswoman and amassed a relatively large fortune of over $300,000, most of which she used to do good anywhere she could. She became the first African-American woman to own land in Los Angeles. She purchased land in what is now the heart of downtown LA and organized the first AME church in 1872, the oldest African-American church in the city. She donated to charities, fed and sheltered the poor, and was instrumental in creating the Travelers Aid Center and an elementary school for African-American children. She had a kind and giving spirit, and many called her Auntie or Grandma Mason. Biddy passed away on January 15, 1891. Number 5. Bandit Queen and Murder Mystery. Born Myra Maybelle Shirley, or Belle for short, on a small farm in Missouri on February 5, 1848. While receiving her education from a girls' academy and being a fine pianist, her eldest brother had a profound influence on her. He taught her how to ride and use guns. The family even grew up alongside the notorious Jesse James and the Younger brothers. In 1866, Belle married Jim Reed and they had 2 children together. She enjoyed drinking whiskey and riding her horse at breakneck speeds. Belle also rode side saddle, dressed impressively in a black velvet riding habit, a plumed hat, while carrying 2 pistols with a cartridge belt across her hips. Belle continued her association with outlaws, her own husband turning to a life of crime that some say she participated in. After Jim's death, she married a Cherokee man named Sam Starr and lived in the Indian Territory. They had quite an active life of rustling, horse stealing, and bootlegging, along with harboring fugitives. Belle once stated that she was a friend to any brave or gallant outlaw. Belle learned all she could and did well on her illegal enterprises, until in 1833, Belle and Sam were arrested and charged with horse theft. Each served 9 months in prison. Belle was arrested twice more, but never convicted. She earned the nickname Bandit Queen. Sam Starr was killed in 1886, and Belle married his relative, Billy July, some 15 years younger than her, and lived on Cherokee land. When Bill was arrested for horse theft, she didn't defend him though, as she had allegedly reformed her ways. Things took a tragic turn for Belle Starr when she was murdered on February 3, 1889, near Fort Worth, Arkansas, just shy of her 41st birthday. She was ambushed and gunned down while riding home. Suspects included her new husband, the disgruntled fugitive Edgar Watson, and even her own children. Sadly, there were no eyewitnesses and her murder was never solved. Number 4. Brothel Madam. Fannie Porter was born on February 14, 1873 in England. By the time she was 15, she was working as a soiled dove in San Antonio and had a reputation as a shrewd and formidable businesswoman. By 19, while other girls her age were getting married, teaching, or nursing the sick, she had spent the last few years saving her money and utilizing everything she learned to start her very own brothel. Built in 1893 and advertised as a boarding house, Fannie prided herself on her own immaculate appearance and chose only the prettiest and most hygienic ladies to employ. There were usually around 5 ladies living there from ages 19 to 24. Fannie was very protective of her girls and banned any customer from mistreating them. The ladies would provide a pleasant diversion from the rough and tumble world beyond those 4 walls. Inside the house provided luxuries such as glass fixtures, silk sheets, plush carpeting, and even chilled champagne for special guests. For several years, on the side, the brothel served as a hideout, rest stop, rendezvous, and even headquarters for Butch Cassidy and his gang, the Wild Bunch. Fannie never divulged the whereabouts of any wanted man to the authorities. She had her code of honor. Of course, Fannie's patrons were varied, and of course, lawmen were welcomed. The law didn't bother her establishment much though, but she was arrested once for vagrancy, or prostitution, in the late 1880s. The last time the Wild Bunch stopped by was in February 1901, and Fannie threw them a farewell party before the gang parted ways. That same year, William Pinkerton of the Pinkerton Agency visited Fannie. She liked him because he treated her like a lady. Soon after, more reform began to target openly operating brothels. Fannie closed her brothel and disappeared from history. Stories varied that she retired a wealthy woman, married a rich man, or possibly returned to England. Another sad rumor, which I hope isn't true, is that she died in a car accident in El Paso, Texas around 1940. One of my favorite TV shows happens to be Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman, and I was delighted to find out that Dr. Quinn was actually based off a real female doctor in Colorado, which brings us to number 3, Doc Susie. Susan Anderson was born on January 31, 1870 in Indiana. Originally wanting to be a telegraph operator, her father encouraged her to become a doctor. She attended medical school in 1893 and moved to Cripple Creek, Colorado to start her practice. She became one of the first women to practice medicine in Colorado. The town was full of miners who refused to accept a female doctor, believing in the silly superstition that women were bad luck, when in fact, Susan's presence proved the opposite. Her skills as a doctor were evident, and one event in particular proved it when she saved a man's arm after an accident when a male doctor said it would have to be amputated. The town began to trust her and respect her after that, and while off to a promising start in her medical profession, the year 1900 was particularly hard on Susan. Her brother passed away and her fiancé left her at the altar, so she decided to leave Cripple Creek and move to Denver. With already plenty of doctors in Denver, she could hardly earn a living though. She moved to Greeley and worked as a nurse for the next 6 years. Later, she became the county coroner of Grand County. In 1907, Susan contracted tuberculosis and relocated to Fraser, Colorado. Over time, the fresh mountain air helped her recover, and eventually, she felt well enough to work again. For 49 years, Susan was the town's only doctor, and they affectionately nicknamed her Doc Susie. She cared for a wide range of patients and medical cases, including those during the 1918 flu pandemic. She made house calls mostly, and on foot, never having owned a car or horse. Her patients paid what they could, usually in food or firewood. Doc Susie retired in 1956 and passed away on April 16, 1960 at 90 years old. Number 2, the Little Sure Shot of the West. Annie Oakley was born Phoebe Ann Mosley on August 13, 1860. Standing just 5 foot tall, she was an American sharpshooter who starred in Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. Annie developed hunting skills as a child to put food on the table. At 15, she won a sharpshooting contest against an experienced marksman and future husband, Frank E. Butler. Annie became renowned for her expert sharpshooting skills and even performed for royalty such as Queen Victoria and other heads of state. The Encyclopedia Britannica says, Oakley never failed to delight her audiences, and her feats of marksmanship were truly incredible. At 30 paces, she could split a playing card held edge on, she hit dimes tossed into the air, she shot cigarettes from her husband's lips, and, a playing card being thrown into the air, she riddled it before it touched the ground. Annie and her husband also starred together in Thomas Edison's kinetoscope film, The Little Sure Shot of the West, in 1894, an exhibition of rifle shooting at various objects. Annie was also a big supporter of women's rights and wrote a letter to then-President William McKinley in 1898 offering the government the services of a company of 50 lady sharpshooters who would provide their own arms and ammunition should the U.S. go to war with Spain. Of course, it was denied as women at the time were not allowed to join the military. After a train wreck in 1901, plus several spinal surgeries, Annie decided to take it easy and tour in a stage play written about her life titled The Western Girl. Throughout her career, Annie may have taught over 15,000 women to properly use firearms, teaching them marksmanship and self-defense, saying, "I would like to see every woman know how to handle guns as naturally as they know how to handle babies." Annie continued to set records well into her 60s, passing away at the age of 66 in 1926. Number 1. The Tragic Beauty. Dora Han, also known as Fannie Keenan, was the tragic beauty of the West. Born in 1844, she is thought to have come from a good Boston home, studied music in Europe, and sang grand opera in New York before heading west. One story says she contracted tuberculosis and chose to move out west for its dry climate. Another says she fled an unhappy relationship. Whatever her reasons or her background, her arrival on the frontier around 1878 was most welcome. Her friend and fellow performer Fannie Garrison had been waiting for her arrival in Dodge City. The men in town quickly took notice of this new beauty. Wyatt Earp biographer Stuart Lake said this of her: "Saint or sinner, Dora Han was the most graciously beautiful woman to reach the camp in the heyday of its iniquity. By night, she was the queen of the fairy bells, as old Dodge City termed its dance hall women, entertaining drunken cowhands after all the fashions that her calling demanded. By day, she was the Lady Bountiful of Prairie Settlement, a demurely clad, generous woman to whom no appeal would go unheeded. Dora was indeed a rising star, acquiring a solo act to showcase her soprano vocals, earning $75 a week, quite a bit of money in those days. She used those earnings to help those in need. Most mornings, dressed modestly toting a basket with sweets or toys, she'd visit a child in need. To her, it didn't matter what race, social rank, or ailment they had. If they needed her, she'd be there. But this didn't sit well with many members of the Ladies' Aid Society of the Methodist Church, having such a woman perform their duties. Well, the town's reverend hushed them up by having Dora as a soloist sing at Sunday evening services. When she sang, there wasn't a seat left in the church. Sadly, things took a turn for the worse in September of 1878. Dora and Fannie Garretson were staying at Mayor Kelly's home while he was recovering from a brawl with James Kennedy, the son of a wealthy Texas cattleman. Seeking revenge, James rode up to the mayor's house and fired 2 shots through the front door towards his bedroom. The first bullet barely missed Fannie. Sadly, the second killed 34-year-old Dora instantly, asleep in her bed. A posse was formed, including Wyatt Earp, and they tracked down the killer, but James was later freed for lack of evidence. Dora Han had the finest funeral they could give, and the whole town mourned for this beautiful woman. So this video was incredibly interesting to create. I enjoyed researching every single one of these ladies' lives, and I look forward to making a part 2. And if you would like to see anyone in particular showcased, please leave them down below and I will take a look. Thank you all so much for watching Lady in the Library, where we explore history one page at a time. Until next time, take care. Bye!